the African National Congress Subcommittee on International Relations is hosting a two-day retreat to deliberate on key international developments and strategies that affect South Africa and the ANC's stance within the global environment. Former President Thabo Mbeki will also take part. To get more information on this now, we are joined by reporter Khayelihle Khumalo, who's watching the story for us. So, Kaya, a very good morning to you. So what is the importance of the session that will be addressed by former President Thabo Mbeki?
Well, absolutely, Mxolisi. Quite a very important moment for the ANC as it's really just gauging at all these all-important geopolitical shifts. As you know, that South Africa's voice does matter. As you know also that South Africa is gearing up to really assume the G20 presidency. So quite a number of international envoys, they do come to South Africa, but also without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most pertinent issues for South Africa will be the current situation in Palestine in the Middle East, where, for example, South Africa, during the course of the past week, they went back to the International Court of Justice, where they're really saying that Israel has been committing a genocide in Gaza, and also a conflict that is really escalating, where we've seen also the hostilities in Lebanon. But also apart from that, South Africa has been very vocal about some situations in the African continent, the current developments in Sudan, the humanitarian crisis, where also we're seeing all sorts of reports being raised, but also the eastern parts of DRC as well, where you do know, Lisa, that South Africa has deployed the troops to try and placate that particular situation through the SADF that is trying to repel the attacks by the rebel groupings. But also this is quite a very important time as well for South Africa and also for the ANC really, Mxolisi, to look at the dynamics within the Southern African region. I mean, you look at what has happened in Botswana, where the BDP, after 58 years in power, they've really just lost power, essentially, to all intents and purposes. This is a soul-searching moment as well for the African National Congress to look at the dynamics really for the foreign policy. How can South Africa adapt, and for the country really to remain as a very key and a very effective player?
And you're speaking about the ruling party having to adapt. I know that you've managed to, maybe get a lay of the land there insofar as how those conversations are expected to sway, particularly when we look at the political climate.
Well, very much so, especially because one of the key speakers will be former South African President Thabo Mbeki, someone who's really synonymous with South Africa's foreign policy, somebody who was behind quite a number of instruments in terms of support of the African Renaissance. So it is a closed session for now, but we do understand Mr. Mbeki speaking about a number of issues and how the ANC should really just adapt to all these dynamics. But also when you look at during the course of his presidency, he spoke a lot about African Renaissance, but also the peacekeeping missions, but also just moving to what's the African National Congress policy when it comes to the foreign issues, where when you look at the issues around supporting the oppressed nations, the current situation in Western Sahara. As you know, that the ANC has been very vocal in terms of making sure that Morocco is able to make sure that the people of Western Sahara, they do have self-determination. The current situation in Palestine as well, when Nelson Mandela made it very clear that South Africa is not free as long as the Palestinians are still under the oppression, as they are still looking for self-determination as well, but also the current situation as well in Cuba with the sanctions from the US as well. So it's a very important session for the African National Congress to look at how South Africa can really play a very pivotal role in terms of adapting to these ever-evolving times. But also, most importantly, we know this is a very critical time where we've seen so many envoys, for example, coming to our shores. I mean, during the course of this past week, Khayelihle, we saw the Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister coming to South Africa to look at ways to try and deal with the current situation between Russia and Ukraine. And South Africa's Foreign Affairs Minister, or the International Relations and Cooperation Minister, Ronald Lamola, is very clear that South Africa will always advocate for the peaceful resolution of all the conflicts, but also emphasizing that the African continent is really facing its own challenges. So it's very, very important for South Africa to be a very effective player, especially now, Khayelihle, with all these incredibly profoundly moving times when you look at the geopolitical movements.
And Khayelihle, I know that you nudged on this at the top of our conversation. I want to find out from you, did you get any reaction from there yet in terms of what is the ANC as well as the various liberation movements are saying, you know, following developments in Botswana where, as you mentioned, BDP has been wiped out of power because this has been democracy unfolding?
Well, by all accounts, Khayelihle, these are very seismic shifts, especially for these former liberation movements. As you know, that's ANC with BDP in Botswana. Also, you look at the current situation in Mozambique with Frelimo as well, where we've seen the post-election violence. I think it really remains, and it serves as a reminder for the former liberation movements really to be on their toes in terms of making sure that they service delivery. As you have seen the developments in Botswana, where Botswana, they were very clear in terms of their very displeasure with the current situation in Gaborone, where really we've seen the outgoing president, Masisi, really addressing the nation, talking about the smooth transition of power. In terms of the ANC, really, we're yet to get an official reaction, but I think there's really a sense, as you talk to the ANC members, that it's high time really for a lot of them to perform in terms of addressing the socioeconomic issues. You look at the current situation in South Africa, you look at the high unemployment rate, you look at a number of challenges confronting these countries, but also, most importantly, we're expecting former President Thabo Mbeki to just give us a sense in terms of his reaction in this regard, especially because, Khayelihle, what is very key from the political analysts there, they're saying that these are very critical times for these parties, whether you're looking at SWAPO going to the elections in Namibia in a matter of towards the end of this month, and also, most importantly, these developments in Botswana as well, really just indicating that the electorate are absolutely very, very angry. They want change. They talk about the issues around employment. They talk about job creation. But most importantly for the ANC as well, as we know that South Africa is a very key country in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of its pivotal role when you look at the peace-making process in the African continent, but also most importantly, Khayelihle, what is very important was that when the Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister was right here in South Africa, he made it very clear that South Africa is about to take over a very important role as a G20 chair. And obviously, it's a litany of expectations in terms of issues around peace processes, climate change, sustainable development. So this is a very important time for the African National Congress really to try and find a way in terms of addressing these issues. As you know that they lost their majority when you look at the political developments in South Africa, how they're going to deal with those tensions that you have from time to time. For example, here, during the course of the Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister's visit in South Africa, there was a whole issue around the visa. And of course, Minister Lamolo is very clean in really stating in very uncertain terms that, look, the visa regulations for now when it comes to South Africa and Ukraine will simply address the issue around the seamless movement and the ease of movement for the diplomats and also the government officials. But of course, the Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister really threw a curve and the gauntlets, and really saying that it's quite important to liberalize the visa processes, especially because South Africans, for example, can go to Ukraine without any just issues, albeit with the conflict that is still underway.
Tell you what, Khayelihle, we're certainly keeping an eye on that story. Thanks very much indeed for that update. That's our very own Khayelihle Khumalo watching that story for us.